Hey, it's State of State. We got your Nittany Line update. It's a football discussion with Tom and Justin, so kick back and press play.
With former Penn State and NFL defensive back Justin King, I'm Tom Hannafin. This is State of State. This podcast is presented by BetOnline. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting, BetOnline provides you with all the action and the ability to watch the games as they happen. With the largest selection of odds on everything, football, the NBA, college basketball, the NHL, the UFC, and other MMA events. Head to betonline.ag today to get in on the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. State of State is presented by BetOnline. The game starts here. State of State is proud to partner with Illumination Brewing for another season of crafting State IPA, the perfect tailgate and game day beer for Penn State football fans. State IPA is available now, but it won't last much longer. Check in with your local beer distributor, grocery store, plus select bars and restaurants. Visit illuminationbrewing.com/beer/state-IPA to learn more. Must be 21 years or older to purchase. Please drink responsibly. Also, State of State is a proud supporter of Blue White Outfitters. Blue White Outfitters was created as a retail shop meant to highlight the confidence, competitiveness, and fearlessness of the elite athletes found throughout the history of Penn State University. Check out their Lockdown U and Lawn Boys merchandise today. All sales from Blue White Outfitters directly benefit Penn State student athletes. Also, official State of State merchandise is available now. Support the show and grab State of State t-shirts, hoodies, hats, and more. Visit www.bluewhiteoutfitters.com today. On this edition of State of State, we are talking about the effect on Penn State football and the NIL arms race going on right now in college football, considering that Michigan has flipped quarterback recruit Bryce Underwood from LSU, and he will now be a Wolverine starting next season. This could have immense ramifications, obviously, on the field, given his evaluation. There are some people saying that Underwood is comparable to Cam Newton in his heyday at Auburn once upon a time. Want to get Justin King's opinion on that. First of all, is an expert evaluator and in charge of LIG Sports Group, perfect person to talk to, but especially considering the way that Michigan has played this year and their deficiencies at quarterback, this is a massive flip from an SEC school to Michigan. It's from Belleville, Michigan, grew up right down the road from Ann Arbor, so that makes sense, but there's a lot of connective tissue here and a lot of money that ultimately made this happen. So there's a lot of layers to this, but I want to start with this, Justin, in terms of your thoughts on the player and that comp that I just mentioned.
Well, I think he's an elite player, right? You talk about checking all the boxes. He has the accuracy, he has the arm strength, he has the athletic ability. You know, mobility is a big thing in today's age of football, especially in college, right? 6'4", 205, can throw it a mile, can hit it on the run. Seems like a pretty tough kid. I don't know him personally, but just the way he plays, right? He's able to make plays with his feet in the air, and he has a demeanor about himself. He's an elite prospect. You don't find too many guys like that. How does he perform under the lights? I don't know. How do first round draft pick quarterbacks perform when they get to an NFL team? So I think that's what we'll have to see, but you should see where the market is going with like these high level quarterbacks. And it goes into the philosophical approach of different teams, whether you're trying to find a quarterback in the transfer portal, quote unquote free agency, or do you get them out of high school where you can get 3 to 4 years to build the relationship, build the equity in that, and kind of have probably a better read on the high school kid, not how he performs, but the actual person and player versus going to the portal for a 1-year thing. And then you can bring continuity into building around that player, especially, so reports say that he signed for $12 million. So you think about $3 million a year for 4 years. There's some stability there. We have stability, alignment. You can do that with a blue chip type of quarterback that's in your program. And I think Michigan specifically, I think quarterbacks has been a problem over the past 3-4 years, to be completely honest, right? Even when JJ McCarthy was coming, it was still him. He didn't come out the portal, but he had a chance to
JJ McCarthy just had a ceiling to him. Like,
He had a ceiling to
obviously
him, yeah.
much better than anybody playing quarterback right now for Michigan. But I
Right.
understand what you're driving at. Is McCarthy just had a ceiling of what you could ultimately do with him. Still a very good college quarterback.
100%. And so, I mean, this kid, when you can find a player like this, like if you want to compare him to Cam Newton, like Cam Newton was worth every dollar if he ever got the money from Auburn because they went undefeated and won. So, like when you do put that money, typically 20% or even more, just outside of that revenue sharing model, all in on a quarterback, you can hit or you can miss, like the Giants, where they, cut ties with their draft pick. So, it comes down to the evaluation. I think the kid is worth the money for what the market says it is. Rare talent and how that talent is developed and cultivated is going to be based on Michigan's program, coaching. Shout out to Kurt Campbell, Sam Popper up there, and those guys, the head of recruiting, DPP, and then the offensive coordinator used to work with us over at Penn State. But that's a major get and a major talent that you can build your program around, where you can have some level of stability. You have a quarterback. I mean, you see how it goes for different professional teams, right? And we just start using those comparative things, whether it's like a Lamar Jackson or you talk about Patrick Mahomes, like that stability at quarterback. You can build a lot of things and have flexibility with the rest of your roster. So it's a big move and sets the table for everybody else in the Big Ten.
Now, there's plenty of you watching and listening to this podcast. I'm like, what does this have to do with Penn State? I think it has everything to do with Penn State. And you talk about stability. Penn State has that at the quarterback position right now with Drew Aller. And you've seen that steady progression. I know there's a lot of Penn State fans that wanted to see Drew Aller starting last year and just immediately be incredible, lights out, all that stuff. But you've seen how he's matured both on and off the field, how he's grown into a leader, more confident, better in game, everything that you could potentially ask for. And he's taking that time to develop. The concern I have now as a broadcaster is that now there's this Venn diagram of the time in which Underwood could potentially be at Michigan if it is $12 million for him to be there potentially for 4 years consecutively. If there's no transfer or anything like that, who knows? We're still living in the Wild West. There's a lot of things out there on the internet about this, but if Underwood is this program changing quarterback and can stabilize that position for Michigan for the next 4 years, starting in 2025, then you have to reasonably look at, okay, what's the window for Penn State to be successful? One, in the college football playoff, consistently making the college football playoff, and two, potentially winning a national championship under Drew Aller's tenure. Because I have an expectation Drew Aller will be back next year. And you were just mentioning how the Giants just released Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones is this perfect case study of, you've heard some people say he's a first-round pick, he's a franchise quarterback, and you heard other people like Todd McShay being like, he's a backup. He has talent, he has some intangibles, but he needs time to develop. Tom Brady has been talking about one of the great, quote, tragedies currently of pro football is that they're just throwing young kids into the lineup in the National Football League. Not that that hasn't happened in the past, but I look at Drew specifically. Think about his high school evaluation. He went from a 3-star to a 4-star. He didn't turn into a 5-star until his senior season was underway. Look at how his progression has gone at Penn State. It has been that steady, gradual incline. My hope for Drew is that if and when he goes to the National Football League, when he goes to the National Football League, he is so fortunate to land in a place where he does have the luxury to sit, because you do see his natural progression over time, and it gives him a chance to learn and develop. That's the one thing we're all constantly forgetting in this NIL era is the word develop. And people are like, it's boring. I want to see him get on the field and do stuff. Here's the thing. Say 2025 is Drew Aller's last season at Penn State, and then you begin the Bryce Underwood era at Michigan as that's going on. Look at the landscape currently of the Big Ten. We have a mega matchup going down this weekend. Penn State will be playing against Minnesota, but at the same time, Indiana versus Ohio State is a Big Ten title eliminator and potentially could bump one of those teams out of the playoff. You have 4 Big Ten teams that are in contention for the college football playoff. There's a lot of discussion about the SEC's got 5 teams being talked about. Big Ten's got 4, whereas it's not even, whatever. Imagine next season or 2026, you throw Michigan into that 5-team potential mix. Say Indiana's still keeping pace, but you still got Oregon. You still have Ohio State. Hopefully Penn State is there. Could USC turn it around potentially? Lincoln Riley has that ability to recruit and get guys out of the portal. You don't know. The more teams like Michigan with Underwood that pop up, the more difficult it's going to be for Penn State to make the college football playoff, period. So when you look at this type of spending, $12 million to go get a quarterback, and we talked about how in the winter, Ohio State allegedly spent $34 million in that cycle on coaches and players. We've talked about it for a while. Penn State's behind, and there's how you have to spend versus how they are spending.
That's true. And I think there's a lot of nuance factors in what you're saying, because you think about a quarterback is 12 million, but you think about over a 3 to 4 year time period. So like you think of when guys sign, Daniel Jones, for example, I'm sorry, but use him as the example. He signs for $80 million, but like how much does that go to the cap? How much does that go this year, next year? So you think about this kid, I'm saying roughly $3 million a year for a prime quarterback that you're committing to coming out of high school. I think it comes down to, again, the philosophical approach of the alumni base. We know that Barstool, again, I don't know if it's come out, but Barstool has something to do with, Bryce Underwood coming in. You got an overzealous.
Dave Portnoy, to your point, not to interrupt you, has been very
no. But
I will throw out $3 million for Michigan to go get a quarterback.
So to make that commitment to him, like, all right, we're committing to you 3-4 years. This can get it up to 12 million and do it that way. You have to spend money in the right areas is the point that I'm trying to make, right? So it's like understanding that, yeah, you do have to spend money and you do need vested alumni that are willing to kind of make things shake when you're talking about the number one player in the country, right? Because you're absolutely right. Theoretically, you get the number one player, you could build around that, and that changes a window. There's a lot of things that happen within football where like the pieces need to come together, but it's going to come down a lot in this new landscape of the asset allocation and talent evaluation from the coaching staff, from the recruiting staff, and how those players are still developed from the base level up, right? Because you're only as good as your weakest player on the team. And that's the thing that you see a lot getting later into the season is like, okay, when guys get hurt, who can just step up? I first got to Penn State. I think like the talent level is like a complete 180 of where it was, even though we had Saquon Barkley and some talented players. We think of the depth, like we can only go 1.5 deep. And then it was like, oh, there might be some troubles. Now you see where it's like, all right, go 2.5, 3 deep. And it's like, everybody can play. That's the stability that you're looking for. But to get it over that edge when we're talking, we're still a top 5 team currently, right? So we're talking national championship talk here. So like we're splitting hairs a little bit. You have to be willing to, I have crime pays, right? You have to be able to bend the rules a little bit. Like even when we look at this situation and just the whole context of like Michigan, they're coming off of a national championship. They got 8 violations during that national championship.
Controversy, cheating allegations,
a whole bunch of controversy. Now the coach is gone, making $10 million. The guy who was doing this, Connor Stallions, was still in the signs. He's Bryce Underwood's high school coach. So if you don't think that the guy that was like putting his everything on the line for Michigan, because everyone doesn't have the big money, but I think he's just as valuable as Dave Portnoy is. Right? When you're like getting that close to a player to be able to flip them to Michigan, have a close read on the player, understand how he learns. Like the dude's like an analytical type of guy if he's still in signs like that. So I'm sure that he was relaying the proper information of like, hey, we need to invest in this guy. Right. And like, so seeing that different tactical talent acquisition, regardless of it's at the end of the day, you need money, but how we got to that, I think is something that Michigan has done. And I think the proof's in the pudding, whether it's signing the number 1 pick or win a national championship with all those checkered things in the midst or the buildup of it, because we're not going to remember it in 10 years. Like, oh no, they're going to be national champions. Like that's what this whole game is. So even when we think about Penn State, yeah, I think we do a good job of success with honor, trying to do things the right way, covering our butts a little bit. But if that's the case, we just can't complain about how, like what it can't, how come I'm trying to say, you cannot get upset if we're not going for the number 1 spot, because going for number 1 spot is like a full total buy-in of everything, everybody. Not to say that there's like, even turn it up so better on the coaching staff, right? Okay, it's money, but it's like, how are you using the tools that you do have? I feel like the teams that use their whole ecosystem in whatever creative ways they can are the ones that are going to land players. The world of talent acquisition is a dirty game. Yes, money comes into it, but at the same time, you have to have something to offer top level talent, and you have to be going for top level talent.
And as I mentioned, that potential logjam just to get into the playoff that you could see next season and beyond. And we're experiencing it right now. Penn State is relatively safe in terms of making the playoff, but you look at some of these teams within the SEC, they're having that stress. They're feeling that stress right now. Penn State could start feeling that same stress next season, and all the rumors and questions surrounding James Franklin once the 12-team playoff was announced of, well, how's the fan base going to react if Penn State doesn't make the playoff? One, I'd tell you very negatively, but it seems like Penn State's on pace to do that. I don't know how far they're ultimately going to make it. We have to see where the bracket ultimately winds up. It changes every single week. So you could speculate all you want, but right now it's like, oh, they could be hosting Georgia. Great. That could change next week all of a sudden. So we'll have to wait and see. For me, my question is, did this protect Sharon more long term? Because I don't think he was going to get fired at the end of this season, but you felt the rumblings of like, we went from a national title, Harbaugh, all this stuff, to 500 ball.
I think it does. I think you look at it similar to drafting a first round quarterback, right? Like that quarterback, that OC, that head coach, they're kind of all tied together. Same thing with this crew. Like I think him signing the number one player and flipping them from LSU does provide some job security. Number one reason coaches get fired is not necessarily always losing. It's because they're losing because they don't have the players that they need to win, right? It's very seldomly like, oh, he's getting fired because he's making bad calls on fourth down or he's bad clock management. That's not what happens. It's when it's a 5-5 and it's a personnel situation because your job is to acquire talent, develop talent, and deploy talent, right? And so when you look at those type of things, yeah, this is a big notch on the Thanos rings, right? When you get the number one guy at the prime position of quarterback. Let's not mistake that this is a different situation when you're talking about that top level guy. And you're right. I think it's a little different than Drew Aller as well, because even though he rose to becoming the top guy throughout the process, I think that's a little bit different going through the process as the number one guy, being committed and flipping and going to your hometown school.
In terms of what Penn State might think of this, I'm not asking you for intel. Obviously, you have a great relationship with a lot of members of the current staff, past and present, but is this a situation where now you have to reevaluate the chessboard?
Not necessarily. If you feel good about the things that you do have, I think you have to rearrange. I guess it expedites filling in the gaps that you deem exist, right? So if it's outside receivers that we're having a hard time with, we got to turn up the notch on that. We got to understand, like, okay, if there's a receiver pool, like what Michigan provides and what Penn State provides is similar. So we're going to recruit a lot of the same players. Now, sometimes Michigan probably goes a little bit more national than Penn State does from a recruiting standpoint, but you have to like up the ante when it comes to value in certain positions that have kept us, is a successful program, but not getting us over that hump. Because I think Michigan will be able to land top level receivers and skill guys when you can sell number one player in the country being a quarterback. So from that standpoint, I don't think it's readjusting. I just think it's like taking a step back and looking at what we have and maybe turn up the intensity on some gaps that still exist.
Well, I think about it this way is, again, the hypothetical. Say
Yeah,
2025 sure. is the last season for Drew Aller at Penn State. Say he goes into the NFL draft in 2026. I've asked this question before, is to me, Bo Perbula almost feels like the odd man out. And I'm not slighting his ability whatsoever. I think he could and probably will be the starter at Penn State one day. However, you have heard how James Franklin and the rest of the staff have spoken glowingly of quarterback Ethan Grunkemeyer. And they've talked about how he is this blend of skills that Drew Aller and Bo Perbula have. So you do have to ask yourself, I think, now that Underwood is in the mix, and there's been a lot of this conversation going into this season, during this season, is like, well, who's the best quarterback in the Big Ten right now? It's like, some people think it's Drew. Some people think it's Will Howard. Gabriel has certainly done some fantastic things at Oregon. Miller Moss had a bid for it earlier on in the year. Michigan just never quite got there. Their competition at quarterback has not been good. I'm not saying Underwood's going to immediately step on the field in 2025 and be the best quarterback in the Big Ten, but it's like, it's possible. So you're trying to keep pace in that arms race. Who do you feel better about once Drew Aller's gone and you're contending with a potential Michigan team led by Underwood that's far more credible than the team we're seeing on the field now? Do you feel better about Bo Prabula, or do you like your evaluation of Ethan Grunkemeyer? And we as fans and we as observers, we don't know all that much beyond what his high school tape was, and whatever the coaches feel about him is great, but it's tough to make an evaluation on that. So it's like, are you good with what you have for the next 4 or 5 years potentially at the quarterback position?
I think that's the real question, right? Is it the 4 or 5 years situation, or is it going to be a Band-Aid situation? I mean, you see, I keep using NFL. Yeah, because I keep using NFL teams because like these are the questions that come up with NFL teams when you have contracts and guys don't pan out, dead money and things of that nature. It's like, all right, is this a Band-Aid? Do we have the pieces in place to have this Band-Aid here, or do we need to build something that's sustainable from this position out? And I think that all still comes down to how much time do you have as a staff, right? Or how close do you think you are to a national championship? Because I mean, I think Ohio State thought that they were, close to a national championship when they booted their quarterback last year, right? And he's playing well for Syracuse. So it's a win-win for that whole situation. Mm-hmm. It's just a matter about the right fit in that type of situation. And it's hard to evaluate quarterbacks that haven't been under duress or the gun, in the sense of like, how are they making decisions? What blitz is coming down their throat, or in crunch situations, their clutch production, like what's their accuracy like when that red light is on? Those things are yet to be seen, I think, for both Bo and Grunkemeyer. You know what I mean? Because can't really judge that until they get in. But the traits that, James glaringly seems to like in Gronk, that's a good thing.
It's a good sign, and you got to see what the playing field is like in a couple of years. Obviously, there's so many things that can potentially change. Here's my question. You talked about a Band-Aid, right? How do you think Penn State fans would react to a transfer portal starting quarterback, a la what Ohio State is doing right now with Will Howard?
I think they would react great if it was like a Cam Ward type of transfer, right? He comes in.
And he's yeah, of course. Yeah.
But, I guess
those will grow on trees.
Yeah, but he was,
and they cost a lot of money.
He was a D2 guy. D2, was he D2, mm-hmm. D3? Like, so, you
well, it was Washington. I forget where he was before Washington State, but I understand.
Yeah, it was, you can't, you find them, but that comes down to talent acquisition and evaluation. Like that, like even that whole department of the recruiting staff, everybody has to up their ante in this game, because you have to spend wisely. So like, it comes down to the evaluation and finding the right guys that fit within your team that you've already created and started to develop. So I can't give it definitive, because I know how the sausage is made, and you have to know exactly like, all right, what do we have here? What do we have at this position? How much money are we allocating here? What is this player fit? Because guy can be great talent-wise, and he just doesn't fit in with the culture of the team that's been built over the past 10 years. And then that won't do you any good. You know what I mean? So people have to have a real look in the mirror and understand what our identity is, what our team philosophy and culture is, and like sticking to it. So I think this is a time, I guess, you relook at the board, but it's almost a time to double down on what you believe in, to be honest with you, because I think that's what we saw Michigan do. It's like, yo, we need a quarterback. Let's double down and what we're doing and moving forward. Like, it's just, if your strategy is wrong, then, you're in shit out of luck.
Here's, I think, the real question. Say you get past the Drew Aller era, and it's Penn State jockeying for position with Ohio State, Michigan, Oregon. Say Indiana is still in the mix and Cignetti is still there. This is within the next 2 years. It's a lot of speculation. And Penn State has made it clear they want to rely on their evaluation and their ability to develop players. And James Franklin has talked about it very recently, saying we look at the portal as a way to fill gaps in the roster, Not necessarily saying like a starter. Now we've seen that was the attempt with Julian Fleming. Arnold Ebiketie is one of the great examples from Temple to Penn State, was a starting defensive end, is doing great things in the National Football League. So there's success stories and lack of success.
Yeah, Chop Robinson, right?
Chop Robinson, yes, thank you. So begs the question, if you get to that point where you're with your guys at Penn State at quarterback and it's not hacking it and you're not keeping pace on the field in terms of competition within the Big Ten, would this Penn State staff be prepared to go into the portal and spend what many believe is 7 figures to get what you're describing potentially as like an elite starting quarterback?
Yeah, you would hope so, right? And you would hope that you wouldn't have to pay $1 million for a guy that, I mean, again, the Cam Ward situation. I remember Ohio State laughed at him when he asked for $1 million. So it's all about how you value the player and can that player fully succeed in with your program that you already have. Like there's more than one way to skin this cat. And I don't think there's ever going to be a surefire elite quarterback that's in the portal. Like people that
yes,
people that are going to be in the portal,
it's whatever the market bears. So by this past cycle, Cam Ward, Will Howard were considered within that cycle to be elite available quarterbacks, but I wouldn't describe them as like, oh, they're an A+ overall. Like Cam, you can make that argument. I don't know about Howard.
Well, I mean, they picked Will Howard over Cam, so like Cam went to them first. So it's like, I mean, it's a preference, right? Like everybody has the choice of going to the restaurants, like, and that's how it is with recruits. It's like, do you want Italian or do you want Greek food? Like,
right? You want a burger or do you want steak?
Whatever, you know what I mean? So it's like, but that comes down to you being true with yourself and what you can maintain and what you can produce the most out of, right? And I think, it worked out well for both of those guys, especially Cam Ward, because I think he fits. Like you just see his personality, he fits with Miami. He fits with Cristobal, right? And I think that's going to be the key with Penn State moving forward is not just, oh, this receiver comes out from Ohio State, let's grab him. It's like, yo, does this player actually fit within what we're trying to do? Or, are we just trying to make a media headline splash? So those things come up in the transfer portal because it's like hitting quotas to an extent, but you have to sign the right clients.
And also, I know Penn State cares so much about fit, and I would say from a culture standpoint, everything you and I have heard about Julian Fleming, he fits the culture
100%.
Does he enhance your team?
That's the question that's going to have to be on the forefront at all times.
I think it's a fascinating situation. And again, this is not to anoint Bryce Underwood by any means. The evaluation is the evaluation. You have to see what happens on the field. So much could potentially change. But this is being lauded by a lot of people as a program-changing acquisition for the Michigan Wolverines. And thusly, the rest of the Big Ten is going to feel that ripple effect in one way or another. And especially with so much dialogue that we're hearing just going into Indiana, Ohio State this weekend. I think it is important to sit there and think about how's this going to look a couple of years from now, because you're fortunate to have Drew Aller right now. I don't think Penn State fans truly understand the I love that wins above replacement stat in baseball as kind of like you could be doing so much worse at quarterback than what Drew Aller is. He has done so well. I know there's a lot of people that will knock how many attempts he has or something like that. I'm like, man, like he is a very good quarterback and he is going to develop into something special. It's got to require the right circumstance. I truly believe in what he is. But then you all of a sudden have this added competition. Michigan looked like they're on the decline. Are they on the incline now with Underwood going there? And they also have a pretty good class coming in. So not to fault what Sharon Moore and company had inherited from Harbaugh, but there was a decent class already. This just puts it to the moon. So this is a very good acquisition for them. The question's now, how do you keep pace in the next year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years?
It's going to be a group effort. Alumni got to step up. We all got to do our parts.
Always is. Like, comment, subscribe, rate us, turn on notifications. Get at us on social media at State of State Pod. Let us know what you think, especially in our comment section on YouTube. We appreciate it so much. And if you haven't done so already, you can become a member of our YouTube channel for just 99 cents a month. You can get all upcoming episodes of State of State plus our entire members-only playlist ad-free, commercial-free for just 99 cents a month. Gift it to somebody special in your life and the way towards the holidays. It's the perfect gift. But you can get all upcoming episodes ad-free. All you have to do is hit the join button on our homepage or follow the link in the description of this podcast. Enjoy Indiana versus Ohio State tomorrow. That's definitely going to have an effect on what goes down for Penn State the remainder of the season. We're going to see how everything shakes out, and especially enjoy Penn State versus Minnesota. The Nittany Lions on the road against the Golden Gophers tomorrow at 3:30 p.m. Eastern on CBS. Thank you all so much for joining us. This episode and our entire library of shows is available now on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and wherever else you get your podcasts. Also, let us know what you think of the show on social media and check out all of our content on X, Instagram, and TikTok. Search for the handle at State of State Pod. State of State is presented by Bet Online and by Blue White Outfitters.